We're going to be doing some more reading for the next probably month or so. It's not, the class is not going to be like completely and only reading, but this is a different translation of the Analects by D.C. Lau. He has a really good introduction, which is going to give us, I think, some pretty necessary context for going forward in the Analects. So I'm not going to read the entire introduction, but just portions of it. This will be different, obviously, from last week's reading, so I still want you to be just as attentive, but I would also like you to be taking notes and asking questions. It's still going to be a time of discussion. So yeah, he covers things in a pretty organized topic by topic way, not just as to the content of Confucius' teachings, but also a little bit of his history and the history in which he lived. So I promise it's not going to be that boring. It's not supposed to be boring at all. I think this is actually very intriguing stuff. But we'll get started on that. Let's see. See, I'll kind of take it piece by piece here, and we can talk as we go. So, page should I? So this part that I'm going to start, it actually jumps right into a look into Confucius' teachings. Okay. Because if you guys have looked through the Analects at all, and this is how it has been passed down for however many hundreds of years, it seems like really scattered stuff. Like Confucius said this here, a disciple said this there, and it doesn't at all seem, in fact, isn't chronological. Book 1 is not like this first sayings, and book, whatever the last book is, it's not his last sayings. It's not how the book works at all. And again, this is why this sort of information will be very helpful. So let us turn to Confucius' teachings. Philosophers who are interested in morals can generally be divided into two kinds: those who are interested in moral character and those who are interested in moral acts. Confucius certainly has far more to say about moral character than moral acts. But this does not mean that the rightness of acts in the last resort is unimportant in his philosophy. But it does mean that in any account of Confucius' philosophy, it is reasonable to start with his views on moral character. So obviously Confucius is much more concerned about where those acts are coming from. So the roots of a person is character. The essence of a person, the heart of a person. Before we proceed to look at what Confucius has to say about moral character, it is convenient, first of all, to dispose of two concepts which were already current in Confucius' time. That is, we heard some of these last week, the way, which in Chinese is Tao. If you wanted to spell that properly, it's T-A-O.
Yeah.
That's an older system. It's T-A-O. And virtue, which you could spell, in the Chinese pronunciation is duh. It's a funny sounding word. But that would be T-E.
T-E?
You could do T-E or D-E. It really doesn't matter. You can do T or D, yeah. So, the way and virtue. The importance Confucius attached to the way can be seen from his remark: "He has not lived in vain who dies the day he is told about the way." Used in this sense, the way seems to cover the sum total of truths about the universe and man, and not only the individual, but also the state. It is said either to possess or not possess the way, the Tao. As it is something which can be transmitted from teacher to disciple, it must be something that can be put into words. There is another slightly different sense in which the term is used. The way is said also to be someone's way. For instance, the ways of the former kings, the way of King Wen and King Wu, or the way of the master. So just as there is the way, there's also the proper use of the word in describing a way. Does that make sense? So someone's way, a person's way. We talk about all the time about a person's way of life, right? When thus specified in this a way kind of way, the way naturally can only be taken to mean the way followed by the person in question. As for the way, capital W, the way, rival schools would each claim to have discovered it, even though what each school claimed to have discovered turned out to be very different. The way, then, is a highly emotive term and comes very close to the term truth, as found in philosophical and religious writings in the West. Whenever you hear the word school mentioned in this introduction, we're talking about things that were beginning to form during Confucius' time and solidified after his time, which were basically different clouds of thought which sought to find the way. They all used the word Tao. So you had the Confucianists, the school developed after him, even though Confucius didn't call his disciples Confucianists. So you know that's how it is with influential men. They have a following and then they call themselves their teacher's name. That kind of situation happens so many times. Same with the Moists. There was a man named Mosa, which was Master Mo. He followed Confucius. In fact, that was the first school to contest Confucius's teachings because they saw a bunch of things wrong with it. So they formed their own school. They had their own way. In fact, their own idea of what the way is. And then you have the legalists. I mean, there was a time in China where they call it the time of the 100 schools because there were there's however many schools that all battled and argued against each other. We have the way. No, we have the way. This is the way. That's the way. So, very confusing time. But this was after Confucius, okay? That hadn't quite happened during Confucius' time. Now it's moving on to that next term, virtue, or duh. There seems to be little doubt that the word duh, or virtue, is cognate with the word duh, to get. Virtue is an endowment men get from heaven. Isn't that interesting? We were just talking about that. The word was used in this sense when Confucius, facing a threat to his life, said, "Heaven is the author of the virtue that is in me." That, for me, is one of his most telling statements, that his teachings, his life mission even, was not something that he thought of himself. But this usage is rare in the Analects. By the time of Confucius, the term must have already become a moral term. It is something one cultivates, and it enables one to govern a state well. One of the things that caused him concern was, according to Confucius, his failure to cultivate his virtue. So he did not ever see it as an easy thing, by any means. He also said that if one guided the common people by virtue, they would not only reform themselves, but also have a sense of shame. And when we talk about a sense of shame in the Analects, in fact, that was the one we were about to get to, following the one we read this morning. Shame is not seen in an entirely negative light. It is a sensitivity that one's conscience has to things that are wrong. So a sense of shame is not a bad thing. Both the way and virtue were concepts current before Confucius' time, and by then they must have already acquired a certain origin. They both, in some way, stem from heaven. Very important thing to remember. It is perhaps for this reason that though he said little of a concrete and specific nature about either of these concepts, Confucius nevertheless gave them high precedence in his scheme of things. He said, I set my heart on the way, base myself on virtue, lean upon goodness for support, and take my recreation in the arts. Goodness is something, the achievement of which is totally dependent upon our own efforts, but virtue is partly a gift from heaven. And I would say it's easy to misunderstand what that actually means, because it was also just said that the way and virtue are something that come from heaven. They're sourced from heaven. And goodness is in fact something that one can only receive from heaven, but it's not a gift as in like heaven gives it to you and you have it. It is something that has to be practiced and worked out. That is what your responsibility is. And that's why he's saying it is the achievement of which is totally dependent on our own efforts. Because to listen, you also have to obey. Just think of that kind of transaction. To truly know, learn, and understand something, it has to become real to you through practice. That's how it is with all knowledge. It's not life to you if it's merely in your head. So in that sense, goodness does depend on your own effort. Behind Confucius's pursuit of the ideal moral character lies the unspoken and therefore unquestioned assumption that the only purpose a man can have, and also the only worthwhile thing a man can do, is to become as good a man as possible. Now, interestingly, this is coming from a scholar, a very well-informed scholar of Confucius's works. And that's kind of where the line is drawn for that kind of perspective. But what does it really mean to be as good a man as possible? And obviously we're talking about ladies too. This is not just limited to male persons. The description of the reality of that fails an intellectual mind like this. And so what he's saying is not untrue, but it's also not fully true in a sense, because it doesn't grasp what a good man is actually meant for. What a good man actually is beyond just having a tight system of morals. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to see that a few times throughout this introduction. That seems to be the apex of man's achievement, is a morally righteous individual. But we know that true goodness is something far more profound, much more special, and much more powerful than that. What do you think that is? It's being a son. And we know that that's not ever something we're going to separate from or replace the context of when we're even looking at teachings like this. This is something that has to be pursued for its own sake and with complete indifference to success or failure. Unlike religious teachers, Confucius could hold out no hope of rewards either in this world or in the next. It's a very unique thing to me. It wasn't, you get on this path, you're 100% going to make it. He wasn't like a predeterminist or a fatalist in that sense. He was like, he's pretty real about it. As far as survival after death is concerned, Confucius's attitude can at best be described as agnostic. When Sulu asked how gods and spirits of the dead should be served, the master answered that he was not able even to serve man. How could he serve spirits? And when Sulu further asked about death, the master answered that he did not understand even life. How could he understand death? So to me, Confucius, probably more than any other wise man of the past, as far as I see it, was unmatched in his humility towards his ignorance of things. there was obviously still something given by heaven to him, a kind of grace, not just for his time, but obviously reaching into ours. That nonetheless was very limited, especially in his understanding of the fuller context of God and his kingdom. And so that's not something he claims to fully understand. In fact, we'll look at it in not too long, but there was one Analect where one of his disciples asked him, what is wisdom? And he says, it's to know what you know and to realize what you don't know, or to not know what you don't know. Just to be real about that, not to assume that you have some vestige of an idea of things you don't know, but you're blunt and honest with yourself about the things you can't comprehend. Doesn't mean you settle in your ignorance. It just means that you're very straightforward with yourself and others about the things that you do and don't know. This shows at least. Did you say something?
I did. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
You were just talking about basically being honest and true and real. And, the very start of this, you were talking about moral character versus moral acts.
Yes.
Right? And the preference of moral character over moral acts for the same reason is true, right? That is, it is easy to produce a moral act. It is very different to have a moral character.
Right.
And then very similarly, last week in the Analects, you guys were talking about kind of native substance versus cultural refinement. And native substance it seems to be preferred. And Confucius goes on to say the reason for that is again, sincerity and truth. And all of this to say it's super fascinating with the definition of the way pointing to truth, right? They're all centering around truth.
Yeah, that's a very, very helpful observation. I wasn't even thinking in terms of native substance and cultural refinement. And again, these are terms that half the class here might not be familiar with yet. I wouldn't even say that familiarity with them is completely necessary. But we will get there, and the importance of that discussion will have its time and place. So, but yeah, just thinking about the moral acts versus moral character difference, and you could say right away that obviously moral character is more important because it's what moral acts spring from. But then another could argue, well, how do you instill moral character without learning moral acts? So then the argument might be, which one do you start with? And what we're going to see progress here is moral character, or both moral character and moral acts properly understood, will make it very evident that the character of a person is what is cultivated first before there's such an emphasis on the acts which that character produces. Because that brings you to realize that teaching moral character, instilling moral character, is not just a matter of do these moral acts until you finally reach the place of having moral character. It's a lot more natural than that. It's not enforced. In fact, that just talking about it that way, it sounds pretty religious, doesn't it? Okay. So going back to the reading, this shows at least a reluctance on the part of Confucius to commit himself on the subject of survival after death. While giving men no assurance of an afterlife, Confucius nevertheless made great moral demands upon them. He said of the gentleman of purpose and the benevolent man, that while it is inconceivable that they should seek to stay alive at the expense of benevolence, it may happen that they have to accept death in order to have benevolence accomplished. So even death, and Confucius admitting it was not something like life that he fully understood the nature of. Death is not something that should keep one from living a life of goodness, of benevolence, of righteousness. So, even unto death, that's the kind of commitment you have to this kind of life. When such demands are made on men, little wonder that one of Confucius' disciples should have considered that a gentleman's burden is heavy, and the road is long. For his burden was benevolence, and the road came to an end only with death. But again, I would say even for Confucius' disciples and Confucius himself, there was a limited understanding of what that kind of, the consequences that that sort of life had, especially a life that was coming from an eternal source, they themselves speaking of it as having come from heaven, and what the consequence of that was. But of course, the way that worked out in life as a burden was still a very tangible thing to them. And we know too that death has a greater meaning than simply the end of earthly life. Death is something, it's something known to us every day. It has to do with much more of the work of our inner man than it does with our bodily function. If a man cannot be assured of a reward after death, neither can he be guaranteed success in his moral endeavors in this life. So the really interesting thing about this perspective to me is that living a moral life is not something driven by, I'm going to get this if I live this kind of life. So it instantly cuts off something that I would even say many believers tend to have, which is like, I'm doing this unto some self-fulfilling end. It like cuts the root of humanism pretty fast. Mm-hmm. So like, man is the end. A believer doesn't even have to say that or admit that. But if they're thinking, I want to live a righteous life, or maybe even I want to be a son of God, so that this, and this happens for me, then that attitude of their heart is humanistic. It ends in self. And then they have to go through all of the fiery trials to have that pulled out of them. But the interesting place that Confucius begins is, I can't tell you whether you're going to be successful in this or not. And even if you are in a sense successful in your ability to live out a life of virtue, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. It doesn't promise anything good for you in the what you think is good or is a prize or a reward. In fact, that idea of what you think is the reward may change into what truly is the reward. The gatekeeper at the stone gate asked a disciple of Confucius, Zulu, is that the Confucius who keeps working towards a goal, the realization of which he knows to be hopeless? So, is that the same Confucius I know that's just working towards a meaningless end? On another occasion, after an encounter with a recluse, Zulu was moved to remark, the gentleman takes office in order to do his duty. As for putting the way into practice, he knows all along that it is hopeless. It's kind of a sad way to put it. But again, that's one of his disciples speaking, and one of his fairly rowdy disciples at that. That's another thing that will be very enjoyable as we make our way through the Analects, is you'll see each disciple has a very interesting character. This is Zulu.
Oh, yeah, okay. So I was actually thinking of him.
We always compare him to Peter. Yeah, Peter. He has like the same kind of temperament. Very impetuous. Since in being moral, one can neither be assured of a reward nor guaranteed success, morality, or we should probably say goodness, because morality in the Western sense is kind of skewed, must be pursued for its own sake. This is perhaps the most fundamental message in Confucius' teachings, a message that marked his teachings from other schools of thought in ancient China. So, again, goodness, we'll come to better understand what that means. In fact, I'm really excited to get to the last part of this class, because we're going to see a fuller image, even in the way that the character in Chinese is written, that will enable us to see that goodness is actually not all that different at all from what we have come to understand as love, pursued for its own sake. For Confucius, there is not one single ideal character, but quite a variety. The highest is the sage, Chung. This ideal is so high that it is hardly ever realized. Confucius claimed neither to be a sage himself or even to have ever seen such a man. He said, "How dare I claim to be a sage or a benevolent man?" Reminds me of Jesus responding to the man who came to, good teacher, and Jesus says, "Why do you call me good? Only God's good." And on another occasion, "I have no hopes of meeting a sage." The only time he indicated the kind of man that would deserve that name was when another disciple, Chung, asked him, "If there were a man who gave extensively to the common people and brought help to the multitude, what would you think of him? Could he be called benevolent?" Confucius' answer was, "It is no longer a matter of benevolence with such a man. If you must describe him, sage is perhaps the right word." And does anyone come to mind when you think of a man who gave extensively to the common people and brought help to the multitude? I can't help but think of Jesus himself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the whole world, in fact. Lower down the scale, there are the good man, Shan Jin, and the complete man, Chung Jin. Even the good man, Confucius said he had not seen. But the term good man seems to apply essentially to men in charge of government, as he said, for instance, "How true is the saying that after a state has been ruled for 100 years by good men, it is possible to get the better of cruelty and do away with killing. And after a good man has trained the common people for 7 years, they should be ready to take up arms." On the one occasion, when he was asked about the way of the good man, Confucius' answer was somewhat obscure. As for the complete man, he is described in terms applied, not exclusive. So it just quotes a few more things. I was going to go down a little bit more to that word that we were just talking about moments ago. So goodness. When you looked at this in the glossary of terms, the first appendix, we saw it was the character pronounced Dren. Elijah would know better. In fact, I would like Elijah, if he's willing to write that character on the board for us, because we're going to see something pretty interesting about it. So not Elijah, not the, it's the goodness one, not the person one, but it includes the person. Is it okay if I erase Bachu?
Yes.
Okay, so Elijah, can you point out to us the two characters that are actually involved in this one character?
So it has this character, which is Ram,
So before you define them, just write them both out.
and then 2, R.
Yep.
That's the character for the number 2.
So this is going to be really simple, okay? But what is that character up there mean? The red.
Person, human being.
So it's just person. And then what's the other one?
It's two.
So, what is the first thing that comes to mind when you think of just being totally and completely general about it? When you think of two people, I'm just giving us a little topic question.
I try to not make
What is there the potential of between two people?
Harmony?
Relationship.
Wholeness?
A relationship, yeah, a relationship. So, the root of this word referring to goodness is talking about a relationship. Other translations of the word have people have also used loving kindness. I like the term. I don't know if anybody's used this, but like Dren is like an otherness. It's something that is. It's like apart from yourself, but in a united way. And that it seems a little paradoxical, but is that making sense? Relationship is, I think, the best pairing term, I think, with this goodness. And so, a relationship that is in harmony, that is thriving, is one, obviously, in which there is love. And this is going to be probably the most important term throughout our look at the Analects. And not just important for us, but obviously the most important for even Confucius himself as a teacher. So, thank you, Elijah. He gives us a bit of description of this term here. Goodness is the most important moral quality a man can possess. Although the use of this term was not an innovation on the part of Confucius, it is almost certain that the complexity of its content and the preeminence it attained amongst moral qualities were due to Confucius. So he made it as important a concept, a word, as it came to be. That it is the moral quality a gentleman must possess is clear from the following saying. If the gentleman forsakes goodness, in what way can he make a name for himself? The gentleman never deserts goodness, not even for as long as it takes to eat a meal. If he hurries and stumbles, one may be sure that it is in goodness that he does so. In some contexts, the gentleman or the benevolent man are almost interchangeable terms. For instance, it is said in one place that a gentleman is free from worries and fears, while elsewhere it is the benevolent man who is said not to have worries. As benevolence is so central a concept, or goodness is so central a concept, we naturally expect Confucius to have a great deal to say about it. In this, we are not disappointed. There are no less than 6 occasions on which Confucius answered direct questions about goodness. And as Confucius had the habit of framing his answers with the specific needs of the inquirer in mind, he just mentioned that in passing, but I think it's a very fascinating thing about Confucius. Different disciples would ask him the same question on different occasions, and he would answer them differently. And that's not because he was just making stuff up as he went. He knew the shortcomings of words and their ability to and also the power of words. So that's why it wasn't just like this one verse that he had in mind that could answer any particular questions if it were a formula. He had a keen discernment and knowledge about his students or whoever he was talking to, and he answered them accordingly. He would give them the same truth, but the way they needed to hear it, Does that make sense? These answers taken together give us a reasonably complete picture of goodness. The essential point about goodness is to be found in Confucius' answer to Chung. And this is going to sound like something you may have heard another say before. Do not impose on others what you yourself do not desire. Does that sound like something you've heard before?
Mm-hmm.
What is it? The golden rule. But it's like an inverted golden rule. So the golden rule is do unto others what you would have them do unto you. Confucius said several hundred years before, actually, don't do unto others what you would not have them do to you. But it's communicating the same heart. In fact, he's about to describe this term, but that phrase, do not do unto others as you would not have them do unto you, is, you saw in the glossary of terms, it's the term shu, which can be translated to understanding. So what kind of understanding are we talking about here? Just grasping a concept? No. Think of it in light of goodness, in light of relationship. We're talking about being able to understand another person in a way that you absolutely have to, as one who wants to live a life, is pursuing a life of goodness and virtue. It seems like such a simplistic thing, but the power of it does not pass by Confucius, and I don't think it should pass by us either. These words were repeated on another occasion. I like this one. A disciple of him, or of Confucius, asked, is there a single word which can be a guide to conduct throughout one's life? And I really want to hear what this word is. The master said, it is perhaps the word shu, understanding. Do not impose on others what you yourself do not desire. By taking the two sayings together, we can see that shu forms part of goodness, and as such is of great significance in the teachings of Confucius. This is confirmed by a saying of Sun Tzu's. To the master's remark that there was a single thread binding his way together, the Confucian way, Sun Tzu added the explanation. The way of the master consists in Chung and Shu. That is all. We're going to see Chung, or Chung, as you saw it pronounced in the glossary of terms, is referring to a word translated as dutifulness. So he said the single thread that winds its way through all of the master's teachings is dutifulness and understanding. That's pretty simple. There's another saying, which is in fact also about Shu. In answer to a question from Sukong, Confucius said, the good man helps others to take their stand insofar as he himself wishes to take his stand, and gets others there insofar as he himself wishes to get there. I've always loved this phrase. He says, the ability to take as analogy what is near at hand can be called the method of goodness. In answer to that, what's near at hand than yourself? And that's what you're doing when you practice understanding, when you practice shu. Do not impose on others what you would not have done to yourself. So that is taking yourself as an analogy, taking what is near at hand as an analogy. From this, we can see that shu is the method of discovering what other people wish or do not wish done to them. The method consists in taking oneself, what is near at hand, as an analogy, and asking oneself what one would like or dislike were one in the position of the person at the receiving end. This is very much tying into what we have learned regarding another thing Jesus said. Actually, it was even before Jesus, back in the Old Testament, in the law, I think, where it said, love your neighbor as yourself. Shu, however, cannot be the whole of goodness, as it is only its method. Having found out what the other person wants or does not want, whether we go on to do to him what we believe he wants and refrain from doing to him what we believe he does not want, we can't just stop there. There has to be an order, a context in which you do this. You understand what it is you're doing. A wisdom by which you're doing this. As the way of the master consists of Chung and Shu, in Chung, again this is dutifulness, we have another component of goodness. Chung is the doing of one's best, and it is through Chung that one puts into effect what one had found out by the method of Shu. This is an Analects we'll be looking at together this week as your homework, but a disciple said on another occasion, every day I examine myself on 3 counts. And the first of these is, in what have I undertaken on another's behalf? Have I failed to be Chung? Have I failed to be dutiful? So what have I done on behalf of another that I didn't put the fullness of myself, the fullness of my heart into? Finally, it is also said that in dealing with others, one should be Chung, dutiful. In all these cases, there is no doubt at all that Chung means doing one's best. Another answer Confucius gave to the question about goodness, and again, this sounds like Jesus again, he says, love your fellow men. As he did not elaborate, his meaning is not very clear. But fortunately, he used this phrase again on 2 other occasions. In another place, he said, in guiding a state of 1,000 chariots, avoid excess and expenditure, and love your fellow men. Employ the labor of the common people in the right seasons. Again, the master, according to Tzu Yu, once said that the gentleman instructed in the way loves his fellow men, and that the small man instructed in the way is easy to command. Let's see here. So that is what we will finish on for today in the introduction. Is there anything you guys have any questions about or any observations on?
It's a little overwhelming almost because everything has a connection to everything else, which it's very insightful when you're able to actually draw those connections.
Mm-hmm.
Like even when you said shame, I was able to look at that and actually connect it to somehow seeing oneself as an analogy, which
Mhm.
connects to dutifulness, which and you keep going down, and it's yeah. I think digging into the terms and even almost a rectifying names of what things actually means and going to the true source of it actually leads you to even things that seem to contradict each other actually work with each other.
Yep. That's another phrase that may be unfamiliar to some of you, but which is actually mentioned in the Analects, that being the rectification of names. Confucius, we saw that, we heard in the introduction that many terms that may have actually existed before Confucius' time were in a way reappropriated by Confucius to mean what they always should have meant. So that was actually, in large part, his effort in his teachings was, you guys say things like Shu or like Ren or like Chung or Chung, however you pronounce it. But do you know what that actually means? So it was a re-exploration, a rectification of terms like goodness and dutifulness and understanding. And it's going to be something I think will be taking place even among us. Understanding what we actually mean when we talk about things like being a good student, a good son, a good father from a relational point of view, or what it means to love another person. These are all the things that make up a culture. And it will be coming to properly understand such things that an ancient way is restored in the midst of even our people. This is how it's done. I have a reading assignment. You guys are going to be reading. You're going to be reading the entire first book of the Analects. I think that's only a few pages, so that includes all commentary. So yeah, that's only page 1 through 7. And this is not all in 1 week. I have it due not this Sunday, but the next, okay? Reading the first book, yeah. And this is not something I am enforcing on you, but just highly encouraging. Don't read it all in one day, like many of us are prone to do. If you were to do 1 or 2 Analects a day, that would be probably the best way to go about it. Yeah, I mean when I was reading Analects years ago, just going through the book again, that's something I just really enjoyed doing. I'd have like an Analect or 2 I would read every day, because that's how the Analects are. They do connect with each other, but it's not a flow.
It's digesting.
Yeah. So you're able to kind of comprehend and chew on what you've read. It carries a lot with it. So give it some time and space is what I'm suggesting.
I just wanted to mention real quick before we end. I don't know Chinese that well, so I don't know how necessarily they relate, but I just thought it was kind of cool. So you said that zhang and shi were the 2 things that connect all of Confucius' teaching. That's what Sun Tzu said. Anyways, zhang shi, if you put the words together, and again, this is what I'm unclear of, but it can either mean the center or backbone, which is kind of cool, and the other word is to plant trees.
Oh, those are 2 different words.
I'm aware.
Don't-
That's what I'm saying.
One means middle, one means plant, yeah.
Sure.
Interesting.
But I just think
I
it's
didn't know
cool. Yeah. The character for Zhong is similar in both. I don't know about Shu,
Huh.
but I just think it's cool that backbone and the plant trees.
Yeah, I mean, I would not be surprised if that meaning came from this.
That's exactly what
Yeah,
I was saying.
that's
Yeah,
cool.
I'm sure it's a different pronunciation and maybe different words, but I still think that that's kind of neat.
Yep. One thing, if you have your book on you, you can circle these Analects, or you can just write in your notebook, but there are specific ones that you'll read throughout these next couple of weeks that I want you to pay extra attention to. Some Analects have a more relevancy and potency than others. The first is the very first one, 1.1. Also 1.2 and 1.4. 1.6 and 1.8, as well as 1.14, and lastly 1.16. So know that these are going to be kind of the outstanding ones that we may spend some more time discussing. So if you can, please spend more time meditating on them. And to wrap it up, I wanted to clarify something. I have mentioned before that I am very open and available to talk with you guys, to answer questions and just even just chat with you about these things, because these are things that I at least can say I'm really passionate about, that I really love talking about. I've said that, but I don't want that to seem as if like I'm the guy to go to per se. Only insofar as I'm someone who's passionate about it. But I would be even more encouraged to see you guys talking about it among yourselves than I would be if you were to come to me about it. So don't let this be this kind of like triangle shaped situation where like I'm at the tip of the triangle as far as communication about this sort of stuff goes. Let's let it be among every one of us and to every one of us who do want to talk about it. Don't make it something that, you know, is like part of the class assignment. Let's talk about it because it'd be a neat thing to do. But only if you actually have something to say and have something you want to ask. If it's something that is genuinely interesting to you. In fact, on that note, let's to wrap it up, read the very first Analect. Because he says something that kind of ties in with that soon. 1.1 says, the master said, to learn and then have occasion to practice what you have learned. Is this not satisfying? To have friends arrive from afar. Is this not a joy? To be patient even when others do not understand. Is this not the mark of the gentleman or the good person, the righteous one? It's even that middle one, to have friends arrive from afar. Is this not a joy? I don't know if he's just referring to the fact that you get to see someone that you haven't seen in a long time, but it's referring to and we'll see, and in fact another Analect you'll read in this book has a very interesting definition of what a true friend is. And when that true friend is someone you are fellowshipping with in even matters such as these, it is like experiencing a joy you would have with them if you hadn't seen them in a long time. Because in a way you are meeting a part of them that you've never met before. And it's exciting. It's new. It's on a higher plane. That's it. Yeah, that's just the reading this week.